Before the first train ever rolled, the land moved to older rhythms. Harbours breathed with the tide, fields turned with the seasons, and villages kept their ways unchanged for centuries. Then the railways came, cutting across the countryside, tunnelling through hills, laying down paths of iron and hammering a new beat into the landscape. That steel and stone remembers. Every bridge, every tunnel, every stretch of track bears the weight not only of locomotives, but of lives lived and sometimes lost. Where whistles once cut through the night, silence now settles. And in that silence, something stirs. In forgotten sidings and lonely signal boxes, in stations left to rot beneath ivy and rain, stories still travel. Shadows step aboard empty carriages, doors slam where no passengers wait, and distant wheels seem to grind along lines long abandoned. Our last journeys showed us tragedies and hauntings, but the railways have more to tell. In this chapter, we venture further through northern hills, across coastal lines and down into blackened tunnels to seek the phantoms that refuse to fade. So, once again, climb aboard the Hidden Realms ghost train for this journey from Hampshire to North Lincolnshire to meet more ghosts of the tracks. Hayling Island lies between Chichester Harbour to the east and Langstone Harbour to the west. For much of the last century, it was a place of modest seaside charm. In 1820, the main coastline of the London, Brighton and South Coast Railway reached Havant, and a subsequent Act of Parliament empowered them to build a link to the harbour at Langstone. This didn't come to pass, but then the London and South Western Railway arrived at Havant in 1859, reviving interest in a branch line to Hayling. Opened by the Hayling Railway Company in 1867, over a lightweight timber viaduct that was too fragile for heavy locomotives, the line found its perfect partner in the Stroudley Terrier tank engines. These were small, but powerful enough to manage the crossing, becoming synonymous with the line. Soon, locals affectionately named the route the Hayling Billy. For years, the branch line bustled. Guards like Fred Norris, who began as a signal lad in 1913, recalled making as many as a dozen trips a day to Hayling. At the station, 4 of the staff were former Royal Marines, and the place became known locally as the Barracks. It was, by all accounts, a safe and lively railway, although tragedy did strike in 1946 when Alexander "Jock" Jordan was killed at the Langstone crossing gates by a hit-and-run driver. The line closed on the 4th of November 1963 after close to 100 years of service. But the story of the Hayling Billy doesn't end there. In the years that followed, strange accounts began to circulate around the site of the old Hayling Island station. In the late 1970s, Peter Warden, a highways inspector for the council who used the station goods shed after the railway closed, had a particularly unnerving encounter. He came into the office one day to find it as cold as a refrigerator. Sitting down to fill out some paperwork, he felt a hand grab at his left arm. He turned, expecting to see his colleague, but he was alone. Despite the icy air, Peter started to sweat and was hurrying to finish his work when something forced his right hand to add an extra digit to his report. At that point, he gave up and left the building at speed. Outside, his friend told him to speak to the electricity board employee who had been in the office that morning. This man had turned to see a pair of legs in black boots and faded trousers behind him, only for the apparition to vanish in an instant. Some claimed these disturbances were the work of a long-departed station master, still carrying out his duties in death. Others had their own theories. In Railway Ghosts and Phantoms, W.B. Herbert recounts how a woman named Elsie Taylor believed the ghost to be her father, Jack Wilkinson. Wilkinson had worked at the station for 30 years and boasted that he would never die so long as the Hayling Billy ran. He passed away in 1947, 16 years before the last train rolled away. Whether Jack Wilkinson was truly the restless spirit of Hayling Island is uncertain. Records suggest a J.T. Wilkinson worked as a porter for the railway as far back as 1864, which, if he were Elsie's father, would mean he lived to a remarkable old age. Perhaps too remarkable, unless there is more to the story than simple facts allow. The Hayling Billy line is long gone, its timber viaduct dismantled, its little terrier engines consigned to museums and memory, the goods shed now a theatre. But if the stories are true, not everyone left when the last train did. A guard still pacing his platform, a station master still watching over his office, a worker who swore he would never die while the line ran. Echoes of lives bound so tightly to the railway that even closure could not release them. And so, from the windswept causeway of Hayling Island, we travel inland to Oxfordshire, where the quiet fields conceal one of the darkest Christmases in railway history. On Christmas Eve 1874, the Birkenhead Express was heading north from Oxford along the Great Western Railway's main line to Banbury. It was a busy train, crowded with families, children and students travelling home for the holiday. Just beyond Woodstock Road Station, near the hamlet of Shipton-on-Cherwell, a piece of metal tore away from the wheel of the coach directly behind the locomotive. The train was double-headed and the drivers realised something was wrong. They applied the brakes, slowing the train abruptly. But the strain was too much, breaking the drawing bar connecting the leading carriage. According to the formal Board of Trade inquiry, this initial carriage was thrown from the line altogether and run over and completely destroyed. 9 further carriages left the rails, tumbling down the steep embankment into the frozen fields and piling up on either side of the Oxford Canal. In the confusion, fires broke out among the wreckage. The result was devastation. 34 people were killed, the youngest just 4 years old, the oldest 59. Nearly 70 more were seriously injured. Some of the dead and injured were carried to nearby Hampton Gay paper mill to await help and identification. An artist from the Illustrated London News later described one terrible scene. Among the dead lay a youth of about 21. A lady entered, scanning the bodies. She saw him and fell prostrate with grief over his face, raining kisses upon lips that could never return her love. That outpouring of anguish became fixed in memory as one of the worst disasters on the Great Western Railway. But perhaps it also left something behind. Because less than a mile from the crash site, in a modern terraced house in Kidlington, strange things have been reported. A child seen crossing a room before vanishing through a closed door. The phantom cries of babies. Objects moving on their own, lights switching on and off, footsteps in deserted bedrooms. The house is marked by cold spots, by the unexplained stench of ashes, and by sudden bursts of burning smells. The owner believed these odours were echoes of the fires that consumed the coaches on that frozen Christmas Eve. And at night, a more chilling figure sometimes appears. A woman in black, sorrow etched on her face, enters through a closed bedroom door. There's no mist, no transparency. She appears lifelike, as if she's stepped across from another time. Having been shown the artist's sketch of the grieving mother at Hampton Gay, the owner noted an uncanny resemblance between her and his spectral visitor. Neighbours, too, have spoken of ghostly figures. A woman and 2 children, followed by a man, walk towards the house, only to vanish before reaching the door. Why this house? Why here, a mile from the crash? Does it stand on the site of a place where the victims were once brought, their suffering impressed upon the land itself? There seems to be no address for this Kidlington property, so I can't be sure. But on that night in 1874, amid fire and snow and unbearable grief, something may have taken root. Something that has never quite gone. The line from Oxford to Banbury still runs today. Trains thunder past the quiet fields of Shipton-on-Cherwell. But the echoes of that terrible Christmas Eve still linger, in tales of footsteps, fire, and the face of a woman forever lost in mourning. From fields marked by sorrow, we journey on to Winchcombe in Gloucestershire, where the shadows of Greet Tunnel are waiting. South of Winchcombe Station lies Greet Tunnel. Nearly 700 yards long, it runs on a curve, so that once inside, neither entrance is visible. In the middle, there is no light at either end, only blackness. When the Great Western Railway drove its main Birmingham to Cheltenham line through here, this was an act of Victorian ambition, a path for progress carved through the Cotswold Hills. Today, the Gloucestershire-Warwickshire Steam Railway, a volunteer-run heritage line, still runs trains through the darkness. And passengers still feel a sudden chill as the carriages plunge into the tunnel's hollow heart. But Greet Tunnel carries more than steam and echoes. It carries a shadow. The story goes that in the 1920s, a railway ganger was struck by a train in the tunnel and killed. Since then, his ghost lingers, caught forever in the place where he fell. Travellers speak of strange shapes in the dark, of movement just beyond the glow of the carriage lamps. And when you are in the blackest stretch, with nothing but the clatter of wagons over the joints, you can imagine almost anything. This tale may come from a real event. On the 29th of March 1928, tragedy struck a gang of GWR platelayers working at the station end of Greet Tunnel. Around 45 men were preparing the line for re-sleepering, some inside, others outside. At 11:35, a goods train from Winchcombe to Cheltenham roared through. The men stood back to let it pass. At the same time, a rail car from Cheltenham to Honeybourne entered the tunnel from the other direction. Despite the lookout man blowing his whistle and shouting the warning, "Both roads!" this second engine hit 5 men. Maurice Evans, newly married, was killed instantly, his head and leg crushed by the impact. William Enon and Ernest Pearson were gravely injured, and both later died in hospital. The solid brick tunnel has no intermediate vent shafts, so smoke hangs thick inside. Witnesses said this, the noise and the violent draft made it impossible to hear or see the oncoming train. The coroner called it an unfortunate and deplorable occurrence, a terrible accident that should never have happened. And while all safety procedures had been followed, were they ever enough? A whistle and a shout to safeguard 40 men on a busy railway track in a smoke-filled pitch-black tunnel. Little wonder that a man who died in such an avoidable manner might still be there, a replay of fear and confusion, frozen in time. So when the heritage trains plunge into Great Tunnel, their carriages shaking, their lamps straining against the dark, spare a thought for the lives that have been lost. And perhaps in the rattle and echo, you may sense more than history in the darkness. Leaving Winchcombe behind, our ghost train carries us north and east, towards Lincolnshire and to Wrawby Junction, where fate and prophecy met in steel and fire. Railways run on rules. Every signal, every set of points, every timetable is part of a system designed to keep chaos at bay. But sometimes accidents still happen. And every so often, an accident seems to carry with it a shadow. On the 9th of December 1983, such a moment came to Wrawby Junction, just outside Barnby, in Lincolnshire. The engine involved was a British Rail Class 47, built at Loughborough in 1965 and numbered 47299. On that cold December evening, it was hauling empty oil tankers from Lindsay. At the same time, the Cleethorpes to Sheffield passenger train was edging into Wrawby Junction. A fault in the track circuits meant the points had to be hand-cranked. The signalman reset them, but failed to clamp them in position, and as he returned to his box, the points slipped back. The freight was waved forward. The passenger train was waved forward. And then, the two met. At little more than 5 miles per hour, the impact was still catastrophic. The diesel unit was struck broadside, knocked from the rails, its leading carriage overturned. 11 passengers were aboard. Tragically, one of them, student Rachel Taylor, was killed instantly. The Department of Transport inquiry blamed human error, a signalman who failed to secure the points, and a driver who failed to stop at the signal box for instructions. It was, on paper, no more than a tragic accident. And yet, the story refuses to be so easily written off. In 1981, a clairvoyant had telephoned British Rail giving a vivid warning of a fatal train crash. She described a big blue diesel engine displaying the number 47216. Police records suggested her predictions had been taken seriously before, and there was indeed such an engine. Built as D1866, it was renumbered 47216 in 1974. By December 1981, it changed again, this time to 47299. Yes, the freight engine involved in the fatal accident at Wrawby Junction had been renumbered from 47216 after the clairvoyant's call. In 1984, journalist Graham Bell reported the story for the Daily Express. Enthusiast Howard Johnston had noticed the change in numbering and found it puzzling. "I telephoned Immingham Depot to ask what was going on," he said. "I was astonished when they told me The renumbering of 47216 was because of a clairvoyant's prediction. In her 1985 book Beyond Explanation, Jenny Randalls describes this as a dismal failure to cheat fate, adding that British Rail, while admitting the story was true, logged it all as an amazing coincidence. After Wrawby, the press called 47299 the Jinxed engine. Enthusiasts collected stories of its strange career, its reprieve from withdrawal in 1989, a new life under the unofficial name Ariadne, suffering fire damage and working as Channel Tunnel traffic before finally being scrapped in 2000. Could anything short of removing the engine from service have been done to stop the predicted fatal crash of 47216? The official report spoke of human error, missed signals, unsecured points, and rules not followed. But beyond the blue covers of the inquiry, another story lingers. One about forces beyond our control, about prophecy, and about whether destiny can ever truly be outrun. Today's journey is now drawing to a close. We leave behind Hayling Billy, the sorrow of Shipton-on-Cherwell, the black heart of Great Tunnel, and the fateful junction at Wrawby. But we carry with us the reminder that railways are not just lines of steel, but archives of human experience. Every tunnel keeps its shadows, every bridge its whispers, every abandoned station its restless silences. Perhaps that is why the echoes persist. A grieving mother seeking her son, a ganger lost in the smoke, a locomotive haunted by prophecy. These aren't simply stories, they are fragments of memory woven into the permanent way. And so, as the Hidden Realms ghost train pulls into the end of the line, remember, not every traveller buys a ticket. Some are already waiting in the silence, forever bound to the tracks. If you've enjoyed this journey through Britain's haunted railways, please like, subscribe and share your own stories in the comments. Until we meet again, thank you for travelling with me, and good night.